Last time that we gathered everyone, we were focused on how do you lead in times of uncertainty, and we shared a number of practices for doing that. And we're going to continue that theme, but really focused on how do you gather the collective intelligence of your team to be able to solve the hard problems, deal with the uncertainty that is in front of you. We are borrowing this theme. I love this concept of creating a smarter room. And it came from Chris Toth, who is a CEO of Vantiv, former CEO of Varian, two medical companies. And he had read multipliers. He said it had a deep, kind of a profound effect on how he led. He shared it with his whole organization. And I was so struck by something he said. His takeaway was, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. What you want to do is you want to create a smarter room. And then he was really advocating, like, don't be the smartest person in the room, create a smarter room around you. And I loved that framing. And that's what we're going to do today. We are going to explore, as a leader, what do you do to create a really smart room?
Well, let's frame it. Why is that even important now? I mean, let's do this. Go ahead and put into the chat, what are some big leadership challenges that you are facing now? Today, we were talking about AI this week, and how is AI changing the role of a leader? We're leading in times of kind of unprecedented uncertainty in all sections of kind of the markets and what's going on. So let's put just some framing on it. Building a smarter room. What's the advantage here? What are we really after?
Well, I think we're after collective intelligence. And, we're going to talk about this principle that particularly when things are complex and changing, that having many minds is better than a single mind, and having many eyes on a situation, a landscape, a problem, is a lot better than singular vision. Um, I hope some people put in here some of the challenges that you're dealing with. We're going to grab some of these and we're going to work them during our time together. But to get us started, what I would love to have everyone do is think about a really smart room. And we don't mean smart with technologies and smartphones and smart cameras and those kinds of smart rooms, like a room of brilliant people creating brilliant ideas and thinking together. So here's the first question, and we want you to jam on this in chat. What does a smart room look like? What's going on in a smart room? What does it feel like? What's happening in a smart room? Use any way that you want to describe it, but tell us what a smart room looks like, because that's what we're going to use as our anchor as we go through a number of practices to help you as leaders build really smart rooms. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for getting us.
Things are starting to flow.
Yeah, so there's a couple themes in here. One is that people can share. There's a sense of empathy. There's challenge that's in the room. So we're looking for expertise. There's a lot of listening going on. I love Lisa's there's no phone usage going on. So people are engaged, they're all engaged.
Teresa says respectful debate. Let me see. We've got Kayla saying a smart room is energizing.
No ego. Lots of listening. That's kind of through here.
Open dialogue, synergy, no ego, sharing new perspectives, energy coming from support, and no worry of being wrong. Like people are more willing to share, like, gee, and I think that comes from a place of tentativeness.
Yeah.
And, I don't know that we talk about that enough, but I think the best thinking emerges when everyone is forthcoming with their ideas, but tentative about their ideas. Like, I don't know if this is the case, but maybe this is happening. And when people are tentative, it allows other people to come in when they're not 100% sure. Like, I'm not sure this is going on, but I kind of see this thing emerging.
It reminds me of this idea. So I was listening to a podcast, and the host asked the guest, how do you become more confident as a leader? And this fellow thought about it for a little bit, and he said, well, you just admit that you don't know. And that works really good with this concept of tentativeness. It's where you're not so sure, and people, it's okay for you to not know, and that makes it okay for everybody else not to know. And so it means that you don't have to lean in so hard all the time and be so sure, and that kind of opens up the room for everybody else.
Yeah, I don't know that I talk about this just principle of being tentative as much as it influenced the ideas behind multipliers, because, when I was doing the research, I was also working as an executive coach, and I was coaching a number of tech executives. And one of the consistent themes in my coaching to them was I want you to be more tentative.
Mm.
Like hold your own ideas more lightly. And that's going to create space for other people to come in with their ideas. And it was this constant theme, just
Mhm.
like be a little more tentative.
Mm. Okay, so let's talk. Did you see something you wanted to go first?
Let me see, everyone leaving their ego at the door, safe space, self-awareness of our natural
Mhm.
defensiveness, which is great.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like I get defensive when someone disagrees with my idea. It's like very natural. And then when it's happening, I'm like, oh, that's natural. Now let me just stay with that long enough to hear what someone is saying.
I like Kelly framed this up. When you said blank, it made me think of, reminded me of, it gives this, it gives this kind of natural lean in as you're not just restating what people said, but you're building on the ideas that other people are sharing.
Mm. Here's a good one. Well, they're all good ones, but here's one that I think is particularly relevant for what we're going to do today. Reese says, a smart room sees the big picture.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
And it was one of the challenges. In fact, maybe we should go to our first challenge because it's about like, how do you help a group of people kind of get out of their myopic thinking, the silo they're in, and see the big picture? Shawn, why don't you read this off and let's kind of attack this and look at how would you build a smart room that can help Hussein.
Okay, real quick. And Hussein's a client and partner of ours that's in the Middle East submitted this question. He's not able to join us today, but if you watch this in review, thanks so much, Hussein, for reporting this. You know who you are. I run a team of software engineers, but I'm not getting their best thinking, which I just love the fact that he's even aware of this, because I know that a lot of times when I've not been getting I did led teams of software engineers for years, and this I just want to admit that I didn't even know that I wasn't getting people's best thinking. So, little admission on my part.
So huge piece of self-awareness in this.
He leads, or at least he knows this. I find that they're so focused on their own projects that when we meet to talk about larger issues, they hold back. How can I leverage their experience and knowledge in a group setting?
Okay, this is all about how do I build a smart room. On this, we're going to try to help Hussein um, experiment some practices that can help him build a smarter room, and in the process, help everyone here to build the kind of intelligence we need in a room to solve smart problems so that we as leaders don't have to act like the smartest person in the room. Okay, again, the principle behind this one, if you want to build a smart room, know that having many brains active is going to outweigh and outpower just a singular brain, and that we need many eyes on a problem, many perspectives on a problem. So how do you do that? This is one where, kind of going to a core multiplier practice of, instead of offering answers, ask the questions. And we're going to look at 4 practices around this. One is asking more questions. The second is asking better questions, and then having ready questions. And then we're going to talk about the power of holding on to a question a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
Like holding a question for more than just a meeting or a debate session or a month or a quarter. Like sometimes holding on to a question long enough that the right kind of thinking and answers emerges. Let's start with more questions. We're going to practice what we call the extreme question challenge. A lot of you have probably heard of this. It's, going into a meeting, not just committed to asking a few good questions or asking some questions to get it going, but staying in question mode for the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
like the whole thing. And we're going to do that now. We're going to do the extreme question challenge now. And here's what we're going to ask everyone to do. We're first of all going to ask people to submit a topic. Like if you would like to we've got 100 people here. Can we get 100 people thinking about your challenge, your topic? So would you submit them now? What's something that you would love to get people's insight on? That's going to be our topic, and we are going to just generate as many questions as possible. Now, so go ahead and start submitting a topic into chat. Shawn, if not, we're going to go with one that you've been wondering about for a long time, that you would love to build collective intelligence around. Once we figure out what that topic is, we're going to ask everyone to submit questions. We are going to jam in chat. And they're not questions for Shawn or for me. they're questions that you as a leader could ask to get more insight, knowledge, capability. And we want questions that will, number one, leverage the expertise and knowledge of a team, get people thinking bigger,
Mm-hmm.
find innovative solutions, focus the team on the right problems, but also questions that hint as your concern. One of the challenges leaders have is like, well, if I just ask questions, like I have to suppress my own opinions. I actually don't think so. The nature of the questions that a leader asks, like the bundle of questions, often hints at a concern. Like if you're concerned you're overspending for something, you're going to ask questions like, "Well, what are we spending? How does that compare to what maybe our competitors are spending?" And so, you're hinting, you're sort of dripping your concerns, not shoving them into the conversation, but just getting people to think about the things that you want them to consider and think about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do we have a topic in here?
Okay, let's see. We're starting to see topic. Someone not speaking up, but wanting them to. How can I leverage AI to create efficiencies and enhance our day-to-day work? Tips on how to ensure everyone in the room feels heard. How to handle remote workers who might be working a second job. Give their due.
How do you build a high trust environment?
What's an issue that has been bugging you for a while?
Okay, to pick a good topic for this, we want one where we can imagine a leader gathering their team around a table trying to find answers to this topic. Shawn, is there one that emerges that would be great for that? And we could invite everyone gathered here to, I think you can kind of like upvote or comment on this or put a thumbs up or something and say, like, this is a good question. I'm realizing I'm suggesting people do that. I'm not entirely sure that's what we can do.
Well, you can just do a +1. Do a plus on. We've got 1+ for getting solid groups to work together effectively. Please go through and put a couple pluses on these, on one that you are interested in, that you'd love to see, because I will steal the topic if we don't get one here, because there's always something that I would love to generate loads of questions on. How do we get the team to present and facilitate a presentation to a group of workers? Okay, Liz, is there any in here that before we get some votes that you're thinking of? Okay, +1 to AI, +1 to siloed groups. Um, siloed groups, another. Siloed groups, another. All right, I'm just going to give it another second here for a few more votes.
We're getting a lot of votes for siloed groups working together. So why don't we take that on?
Yeah.
So here's the scenario. You, as a leader, feel like groups are working in silos. You want more collaboration. How do you make that happen? You have gathered your team together and you want to build a really smart room on how to do this. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Generate questions that you as the leader could ask. What would you ask if you wanted to come up with ways to break silos and increase collaboration? Okay, go.
Go, yeah, and just any question that comes to your mind, don't worry about the quality of the question, just the first thing that comes to your mind, and then just start rolling with it. Let's ask it again. Ask it again one more time, Liz, so we can all listen.
If you want to generate solutions for breaking silos and increasing collaborations, what would you ask to get the right conversation started? Okay,
Okay.
Colleen has already given us our first one. Why do you think we're working in silos? Oh, it's such a good question because it's so tempting to want to go to, like, what could we do to break down silos? But like, why is it? And that's a really good question because there's reasons why people sort of just retreat and don't look at the big picture. Maybe it's dangerous too. Okay, what else are we seeing in here? What gets in the way of working better together? With what issues do you need help?
Dara's question, I like some of the changes a bit. It's like, how does it show up? How do you see it? What does working in silos look like?
Yeah. I like Deb's question. What is working about working in silos? And it's another way to get into the why. Did you just say that? And I'm no, okay. I thought maybe I didn't hear your comment. Yeah, what are the advantages of working with silos? It's all of these are such a nice cluster of questions because rather than jump to the solution, it's like it's deepening the understanding of what is the natural pull towards silos. And unless you can't solve it unless you understand like why is this the path of
Yeah.
least resistance.
And actually, Colleen I like this idea. Why are we comfortable in silos? I think that's very interesting.
Yes. Yeah, and maybe because we don't have to work on the harder issues, or maybe we gravitate towards silos because it's what we can control. And I feel out of control
Mm-hmm.
when I'm working outside of a silo. I feel like I'm going to go into the land of victimhood
Mm-hmm.
when I'm doing that. And it's like, it's great to generate all of that. What are we missing out by working in silos? This group is good. This is really good. And let me see, what are you telling yourself working in silos? What are you telling yourself working in silos means? What impact do we want if we change our way of working? Yeah, because that's like focus now on the reward for changing our working habits rather than just how do we collaborate more.
And I'll just I mean, even for me, just participating in this, and it's not the challenge that I have, but all of a sudden, as we're thinking through these questions and I'm thinking about my own, I start to take kind of intellectual and emotional ownership for this. When someone asks me to come and start asking questions on how to solve a problem, and we're just in this generative more piece, it brings me in a way that's so much different than when someone gets up in front of a room and presents a problem. I mean, it's not even like the difference is so massive for my brain because I want to be in the thinking process and I love to be stimulated to see what other questions other people have. And now I'm starting to see the problem from a completely different vantage point over and over and over again as the questions come through.
And we find so often as people describe practicing the extreme question challenge, it seems daunting at first, but then people say, wow, that was liberating. And I love the song you chose, like Think by, Aretha Franklin, because like she then starts to, build out freedom, freedom. And I think it's what happens when you build a smarter room is for the leaders, it's liberating. I don't have to do all the thinking. All this insight is starting to flow. And now I can start to work with it. Okay, you said something interesting. You said this is like the generative part of the exercise. And in that spirit, before we move on to asking better questions, let's just do one more jam on more. Can we come up with 25 more questions?
Mm-hmm.
They don't even have to be brilliant questions. Just can we really push more? And I want to just pause and let's see what comes up. Okay, Andrew from our team, thank you. Can we come up with 25 more questions? Challenge accepted. Liz, thank you for being willing to this. Okay, what do we got? What do you want? How can we work better together? What does the team want? Okay, we're 3 into 25.
Has someone complained about silos? From your silos, can you see our joint mission? What brings us here today?
That's reminiscent, of course, The Princess Bride. Marriage. Marriage is what brings us together today. But it's a great way to start a meeting. Like, okay, why are we gathered here? What are we trying to accomplish?
How does this impact you and your team? What does success look like to you? In what ways are each of the silos contributing to the mission? How are we defining silos? Ooh, that's fun. Just right like that. That hasn't come up yet. At least if it has, I missed it. Sorry, but I love that. Like just going back to let's define this thing.
Do we have any alerts or ways to flag silos when they come up? How does this impact our customer? How can we approach other silos easily? Okay, we're a good dozen into this. And this is where I'm going to invite people to just jam in one more question. Again, like there's something powerful in just more questions, like letting them flow, because the more you kind of take it to the extreme and you come up with as many questions as you can, you start to build like something switches and you're like, I can do a lot of my thinking in the form of questions, and questions just start to flow easily. Okay. Andrew, maybe you can kind of count those up and see. I've lost count on this. What is the leader's role in the room with questions? How can we look at peers in our industries with non-silo models?
We're at 20 right now, I'm seeing maybe 22. Almost there.
We're almost there.
Almost there. A few more.
Okay. For Andrew, we need just a couple more. Andrew, jam them in. Shawn, what's a question you would ask? And then I'm going to see if I can do another one to get us across the finish line on this more challenge.
Is this a problem we need to solve?
What happens if we don't solve this problem? Okay, what role are you playing in contributing to the silos? And maybe the best question that the leader can ask after you've built some safety in the room is, what am I doing to contribute to us working in silos? Like, is there something I could stop doing or start doing that would make it easier for you to collaborate? Like really looking inside. I try to, when I get myself in a problem where things aren't going the way I want them to, I don't necessarily default this, but I try to get myself to a place where I'm like, I've created this problem. There's something I've done as a leader that has caused this. What am I doing that is perpetuating this problem? Okay, Andrew, did we get to 25 or are we just thereabouts?
We are well past 25 at this point, Liz. We are,
Bam. Bam.
we are killing it.
I'm trying to like,
Bam.
boom, bam to everyone on that. Okay, that is about asking more questions. If you haven't taken the extreme question challenge at least once, try it, give it a go, invite other people to do it. I promise something will shift. I also promise it will be hard. Okay, let's focus on asking better questions.
So we've put together 6 types of questions organized in this value question ladder. And it doesn't mean that the questions at the top are necessarily better than the ones at the bottom, these question types, but think top of the ladder, think innovation. You're in a further space away from running on the ground. Let's call that execution. So let's just talk through this real fast, and then we'll pick one rung to jam on. So at the bottom of the ladder, you've got the closed-ended question. Hey, you can get a lot of intelligence from a good closed-ended question. Like I remember this time when I was working in Germany, we had this big deliverable. We'd failed several times. We got all these software developers in the room, and the only question that one of the engineers could think was, "Are we ready to ship this?" And before you know it, we had just boards full of reasons for and not. Yes, we're ready to ship this. No, we're not ready to ship this, etc. It turned into a deliverable to the client of known issues. And they accepted the known issues, and then we delivered the software, and we didn't lose the contract, which was millions upon millions of dollars. So it was just a single closed-ended question that got all of this intelligence in the room. There's the open-ended question. Tell me more. What else? These are great coaching questions. They're great questions that get you closer to execution or maybe thinking more deeply about a problem. The leading question gets a little bit of a bad reputation, but the leading question actually could be your best friend if you have an outcome that you want. So let's say that Liz, you and I are working together, and I know that we need to deliver something by next Thursday. And so I come to you and the team and say, hey team, what's the best way for us to deliver this by next Thursday? Well, automatically, I don't have to hide or hold back that I need something done by a certain time, but think about how different that feels versus this. Liz, I'm going to need you to deliver that by next Thursday.
No, and it's so much better to help people see what needs to happen through a question than a command. And, the leading question does get a bit of a bad rap. And, yes, can it be manipulative? Yeah, if you look at what manipulation means, like just the ability to like change or move something. But as a leader, that's part of what you need to do. There are lots of times where you need people to act and act for maybe even a particular way. Where it becomes problematic is when it's the only thing you can do. Like if that is as high up the ladder as your skill set goes as a leader, that means you're operating kind of in the realm of control and manipulation, but it has a place in the repertoire.
Absolutely.
Okay, keep taking
the guiding question is a way for you to share the things that you see, but in question format. I love doing this. If I've got some concerns prior to a meeting, I'll sit down and I'll write down all of the concerns that I have, and then I'll challenge myself to turn those into a question. So now I'm going to the team with a question that they can participate in. So, for example, if I were to come in and say, if I'm concerned that we've got a silo problem and that we're not collaborating with other departments, instead, if I want to convert that into a question, and I go in and say, what might be contributing to us working in silos? It's a different thing than me getting up and telling everybody and declaring that I'm concerned about the silo problem that we have.
And by asking a question rather than making an observation. What you're saying is, I am open to input.
Mm-hmm.
I am open to input. Okay.
So then you get to the discovery question, which these are the questions that no one has the answers for. And that may even be okay to preface, to say, hey, I'd like to explore a question that I know none of us have the answers for. And this kind of gives freedom for people to jump in and to contribute, because they know that you're in the I don't know space. This timid discovery questions are great for keeping it timid, because you don't know and you recognize that everybody else may not know the answer. When you get to the top of the value question ladder, you get into the challenge questions. These are the questions where you get a sense that something's off a bit, that maybe there's something that's cracked in the underlying assumptions on how we're operating. Maybe there's a data set that you're not sure of, or a belief that we have about the way something happened. And so you come in with a question that is really kind of trying to expose that, like, where might this data be misleading us? So let's do this. Let's do another round of questions. Let's pick one rung. Let's have people.
Okay. Rather than me pick it, let's go with the popular vote. We're going to jam questions on one rung of the ladder, push on
Okay, good.
direction. Which one should we go for?
Okay, throw it in the chat.
We're going to go with the first 10 responses. We're going to take the most frequently suggested one in the first 10 responses. Okay, which rung should we jam questions on? Okay, Sherry, serenity, challenge, guiding. Okay, guiding.
Oh.
We're tipped towards guiding.
There it is. Oh,
Okay,
okay.
we do guiding.
All right, let's jam it out. So let's go back to our problem on silos. Should we keep it?
Yeah.
Create a guiding question. Think of a concern that you have about silos, working in silos, and convert that into a question.
Yeah. Or something that you can see that's a problem or an opportunity, and you just want to help other people see it.
Mm.
I like to think of this as, you see a car coming around the corner and you just want someone to be eyes up, paying attention. You're not necessarily grabbing their body and moving it out of the way. You just want someone to see what's happening so they can take appropriate action. Okay, guiding questions.
I got one.
Let's go. I haven't seen any yet.
So I'll kick us off. If we persist working in silos, what do we have? What'd you get?
Barbara, I love it. It's not a question, but it's so good. It's just, Houston, we have a problem. It's kind of like, okay, it's like a universal of saying, everyone, like, stop what you're doing and pay attention. It's a rally cry.
Okay, here's one. As you were all typing, if we continue working in these silos, how will that affect buy-in?
Oh, that's a really good question. That makes me almost want to stop and jam on that, because that's interesting. Here we go. What might be contributing to us working in silos? Again, it's Serenity's question here. She's hinting at the fact that she thinks that, like, we as a team are contributing to this, so let's explore it. And, one of the things I hear people say is, well, if a leader just asks questions, I won't know what's on their mind. People want to know what their leaders are concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it becomes problematic when the leader's concerns and the leader's answers are the only thing that gets discussed or acted upon. Okay, what else do we have? How is this reducing our performance? What could be the impact on collaboration from working in silos?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think our customers know about all of our different departments, or do you think we are just, or do you think we are just one company? So it's like pulling that customer perspective into it. Okay, and thanks for the correction on the typo. I sort of fuddled my way through that. Are we getting enough information from each other when we are in these silos?
Nice, very nice.
It's a nice set of questions.
Yep.
Okay, anything more on this, Shawn, or should we move to the third practice?
I'll say this though. We'll share the value question ladder today in the show notes, or email this out for everybody. If there's a way that you can think about this as we go into this next piece on generating back pocket questions, you can use this value question ladder as just a stimulator. And especially if you're in a challenge, or you're struggling with something, or you get the sense that stakes are high. There was a leader that we worked with that just had this practice once a week. They would write down what the biggest problems were that they were struggling with. This leader ran an organization of tens of thousands of people, and he had this practice of just sitting down, looking at this ladder, and generating all the questions that he could think of for the week to carry along. Kind of goes right into this idea of back pocket questions. So you can use this as a generative stimulator.
Okay. Again, if you want a smarter room, ask more questions, ask really good, insightful, thought provoking, energy focusing kind of questions. And then the third practice is to have ready questions. I'm always looking for, like, what's the lazy leader's approach to being a multiplier? Like, what's the fast path for doing this? And it might be that you on Monday generate the questions for the week, or you take a few minutes before you go into a meeting. But I know people run from meeting to meeting, and you might develop a set of back pocket questions over the next like 4 minutes. We're going to jam as many. We're going to invite you to create your own set of back pocket questions. Here's how we're going to do this. We're going to start with yours, and then you're going to steal from your colleagues, pseudo colleagues, this group gathered here together, and then you can steal some of ours. I think of back pocket questions as like, a set of questions that you can just carry with you. A great back pocket question is one that can be used not in a particular setting, but in virtually any setting. Like maybe the ultimate back pocket question is, what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
What's on your mind?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this fast. In the next minute, would you enter your favorite question? It's a high utility question. It gets people thinking. It can be used, like, it has utility in a number of settings. What keeps you up at night?
Mm.
Why? What are your thoughts on this topic? What have you noticed? Can you tell me more about what surprises you about this? Okay, there's a bunch going. What I want you to do is steal one of these questions and then maybe start a new comment where you take your favorite and you add in somebody else's favorite. And so you can just put that in. So you're starting to build in this chat window your back pocket questions. Now we want to invite you to steal some of ours. And I think we've got a little chart with some of these. I'll read a few that I just happen to have in my bag. What do you think we should do? What do you think is causing the problem? And we saw that in one of the questions earlier about silos. Like, why do you think we're working in this way? What pulls us this? What does this look like from your perspective? I love this question because it assumes, like, built into the question is this idea that there's not like a single right perspective necessarily. And invite people just like, what does it look like from you? Where might the data be misleading us? Maybe one of my favorites here, it's a guiding question. What am I not seeing that's important for me to understand?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really safe question. It's different than like, what am I doing to contribute to this? What am I getting wrong? And that, if you've got a great, relationship with someone, you could ask. But this is one that just says, like, yeah, I just might not be seeing this. And it would be helpful. It's like inviting someone to kind of give you a guiding question. Okay. Would you pick one or two of those that you like? And what we invite you to do is to start like a new chat with one of your favorite questions, one that you've stolen here from the chat stream, one that you have stolen here from the Wiseman group favorites. Just type them out together, hit enter, and then copy that and, I don't know, paste it into a document that sits on your desktop, or just pull out your phone and take a picture of that, heart it, store it in your favorites, and now you have questions on the go.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going into a meeting and you don't have time to prepare, you just pull out your favorite questions and you are good to go.
Having a set of questions that you can use when you're in a situation where the stakes are high and the ideas aren't coming or you aren't sure is probably one of the best things that I've ever learned is when I'm in a leadership situation. Because it's a lot easier for me to go through questions that I have that might be a good fit than it is for me to come up with answers of things that I just simply don't know the answer to, or I know it would be unwise for me to try to come up with an answer. And so I feel like that it's like a way to get a little bit of relief as a leader, especially in these high stakes situations.
I want to go back to, I'm going to share with you one of Chris Toss' questions. I was meeting with him, preparing for a session I was doing for his team, and I noticed some of the people on his team had not yet contributed to the conversation. And he asked, what's a different perspective on this issue?
Mm.
Or what's a perspective we haven't heard from yet? Which is a great way to say, like, we get, like, maybe he's outlined a bunch of things, but he recognizes that there's value in diversity
Mhm.
of point of view, and he's actively inviting it. So maybe you steal one of Chris's. Reese here has, jammed her 3 questions in. She's got a set of back pocket questions. We invite you to do that. There's one more practice on this question asking that we want to offer, and that is just this willingness to hold on to a question. Um, I was invited by, I think it was when I was leaving Oracle, my friend Dinesh said, Liz, what's a question that you're holding right now? And I was really struck by that. And my question was, I said, well, honestly, I'm leaving an environment where I've built up a lot of knowledge and a reputation, and I'm kind of gotten good at what I do, and I'm going out to do something new. I said, my question is like, how does what I know, how is that going to get in the way of what I don't know but need to learn? And it turned out to be a question I thought about for a while. And it was actually a question I wrote a book about, wrote the book Rookie Smarts based on this pondering. Sometimes the answers don't come right away. We have to hold on to questions. And Shawn, I wanted to tell you about an experience I had many years ago. We had bought this, like, we live in this, housing is pretty expensive, here. And so we bought this kind of really dumpy fixer upper house, and we kind of fixed up the downstairs, and then we were trying to build an upstairs on, we've got a growing family. And so we're building this upstairs on, we approve all the blueprints, a construction project is underway. And I come to make a visit. I'm coming, we had to move out of the house. I'm coming to check on progress. And I go to walk up the upstairs, which is being built, and there's a 4x4 post from the stairs, like all the way up to the ceiling. And I looked at that post and I said, well, when are you going to take that down? And Keith, the contractor, said, oh, that's structural support. And I'm like, so there's just a post that's going to go right up, like where the stair turns, just from the floor to the ceiling? And he says, yes. And he goes, it was on the blueprint. And, on the blueprint, it's about this big, this little tiny box. And of course, we didn't see that. And I really reacted to this because I'm like, Keith, it very much my house is going to look like a saloon at best and like a strip joint at worst. I'm like, what is this floor to ceiling pole doing in my house? And I'm like, we cannot have this. This is not the look I'm going for. And he said, it's structural support. There's nothing we can do. And I'm like, Keith, what do we need to do to like re-engineer things so that I don't have a saloon pole, in my house? And he says, I don't know. And I kept coming back every day to just check on progress. And every day I would say, Keith, like, have you figured out a way to get rid of the pole? And he'd say, no, I can't. But I'm thinking about it. Every single day I asked him this question. It became a running joke. And one day I came, so maybe we're into this a week or two, and I said, Keith, have you got any ideas on how we can get rid of the pole? And one day I walk in, I don't even ask the question, and he is all smiles. And he's like, Liz, I figured out a way. And he's like, let me show you what we can do. We can run a joist here. And so if you ever come to my house, you'll see that there's this kind of wacky little turn in our stairwell. But I was like so happy and so proud.
Yeah.
It was about holding on to a question, because I'm like, I know he can solve this problem.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to keep asking.
Yeah. And this is a much more benevolent way than maybe trying to emulate a Steve Jobs or somebody who gets and yells at everybody and tells everybody that they're not doing good enough thinking and they need to bring their A ideas, not their B ideas. There's the patience in this, but I think that there is a place to be able to just continue with the challenge, to hold the question and continue to ask the question over time, to give people a chance to be able to work with it, think about it, know that it's important to you, and give them a little bit of room to sort that out.
And I think the key principle there is it gives people time to think.
Yeah.
Because like under pressure, I mean, he had a plan and I was asking him to change his plan, but I just knew, I'm like, I know he can find an answer to this, but he just needs time to think. And he said, every day on my way into the jobs, I was thinking about how do we re-engineer this?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We'll give you a little micro practice coming out of this. So if you're in the situation where you're just, you're not getting your team's best thinking, you'd like to have people step up and contribute more. And this is some art that Liz found this morning, which is fun. And you recognize that there's a little bit of a jam, a paper jam or an idea jam or a contribution jam. It's just not coming through. A little practice that we do that works especially well if you're getting this kind of like contribution and idea jams is to actually hold a jam session. We do this because we work in a remote team. And so one of the things that we found is to encourage people to be able to feel comfortable to lean in. We do these little jam sessions where our goal is to we get on a Zoom call once a week. Everybody gets, say, 30 minutes to work on a piece of work that they're working. Maybe we've got 4 of us on, take 2 hours. And then we move from one person's piece of work that they need to get done to the next. And so by the end of that 2 hours, two things have happened that are really useful, we found. One is somebody gets people's really good thinking to move something forward that's important to them. It also creates an awareness of what each other are working on in an intimate way that you might not have that otherwise. The second thing it does is it just creates this sense, this feeling that you're in it together, and that work is really about getting the best ideas from multiple people. And that means in the work and in the brainstorming and so forth. And so it's just a weekly practice that we do, but especially for remote teams, there's something naturally engaging. It's inviting. And then you see people finding it much easier to step up and play bigger in a meeting that maybe they wouldn't have done likewise.
Shawn, this practice that you've developed, I think it's brilliant. And what is so good about it is it not only like focuses a group and troubleshoots and does rapid thinking quickly, it's not leader led. It's not like you're deciding when to hold a jam session. Someone on the team says like, I'm stuck on something and I need like the power of the room. And it's like saying like, I deserve to call in the brain power of my colleagues to say, come on, can we all like jam on this? And I think it's an incredible gift for people who are working remotely who feel like I'm just stuck on it. But man, if I can get a few of my colleagues work with me, I can like clear this paper jam and keep going.
Yeah, you get momentum. You get momentum together as a team in a way that's very difficult to do otherwise.
So let's do boom.
Boom. Let's why don't we do this next challenge here?
Okay, challenge number 2. We love this one because it is so full of self-awareness. Joe says, I'm a recovering diminisher. It has not been an easy process for me to change how I operate. I love to share my ideas during meetings. It's natural for me to steer the direction of the conversation, and most people default to my point of view. That should resonate with a lot of people, but I want to change the dynamic. So I get people's best thinking, what should I do? And this is one where we want to go to some of the things we've learned from debating, and particularly about how to get that timing right and give people a chance to do good thinking prior to the event.
So let's maybe we dive in this way. Liz, what are the underlying principles of really good debate that helps people contribute their best thinking?
Let's ask that on chat. So,
oh, good. Yeah.
And would you chat to everyone? I think we saw from Sherry that it defaults to chatting just to host and panelists. Chat to everyone. Like, what are the characteristics of a good debate? We saw some of them come in earlier that it is respectful, but I would add to it that it is fierce. Like a good debate isn't tepid with like, oh, I don't know. Like a good debate is got energy and people have a point of view and people are advocating. I think a good debate is hard hitting, which is where the leader has to perform some like ground rules to make that work. Okay, there's engagement, strong opinions held lightly. Man, that might be like the best posture coming into a debate. Like I'm going to come in with a strong opinion, but I'm going to hold that tentatively, hold that lightly. What else? Openness. It educates others on a perspective. It's candid yet respectful. It's thought-provoking. It could be humorous, passionate, engagement, strong opinions held lightly, high energy, honest curiosity. Yeah, like I wonder what would happen if we took option A. Like I wonder what might be the unintended consequences of that? What's the underbelly of it that we haven't yet considered? Like all those things are going to come up in a good debate.
Okay, so let's say that I've got a debate, Liz, that there's something that I want to get I want to stretch the extremes of thinking on whether we should or shouldn't do something. What are some things that you would coach me immediately to do?
I would coach you to not be spontaneous. I think we think of debate as like passionate and advocating, and it is, but a good debate is like surgery. So you think about surgery, very few people are wheeled into emergency surgery.
Right.
It's like and it's usually a last resort.
Yeah.
You try, medicine and rehab and a bunch of things. It's used sparingly. And a good surgery, people prepare for it. Everyone prepares for it. The patient prepares, the operation, administrative staff prepare, the physicians, the nursing staff, everyone prepares for a debate. And maybe the most important thing about like good surgery, you want a good outcome, is that it's bounded in time. That you don't start a surgery working on like maybe you've had a torn ACL. Achilles, right?
Yeah.
You don't like start on the Achilles and go, oh, well, actually the ACL's not in great shape either. Well, why don't we have a look at that too? It's focused and it's bounded, and you don't start it and say, okay, well, let's come back to that tomorrow. Let's meet on that again next week. It starts, it's focused. In fact, with a good surgery, not with a good surgery, but with any surgery, they are masking off every other part of the body that they're not working on. And they've got like a little opening about yay big. And so it's really, really focused. And I think a lot of leaders want to jump in and debate.
Yeah.
And that's when people will be at their worst.
Yeah.
And I think of Lutziab, I wrote about in Multipliers that, he framed the issue, said, we're going to beat on this a week from now, come in with a point of view and come in with evidence. People prep for it.
Yeah.
Rarely spontaneous.
So thinking about multipliers, let's take a look at this slide. Just talk me through this a little bit. This is the difference between decision makers, which tend to make decisions by themselves. This is right. This is the unilateral decisions, leaders who they decide with a few people in the circle of trust, but they're not using the team's best thinking, versus debate makers. So what'd you find?
Well, I think everyone thinks that debate slows things down, but debate is a tool for speed. And it's speed in the way that a high-speed gondola works, which is like, if you're going to have to move a lot of people up the mountain quickly, you've got to have a way to load them on board of these, carriages on the gondola. It comes off the track, people load up into the gondola carriage, and then it goes back on the track, and then whoosh, it like speeds up the mountain. And it is about slowing down momentarily, thinking it through, preparing, but then what it does is it allows a team to make a quick decision or a thoughtful decision and then execute quickly, because people understand the context, they understand the options, they've debated the options, they understand the risks, the underbelly, they understand people's concerns. And so it's a way of unifying people quickly, rather than make a rapid decision and then wonder why for months it's spinning.
So let's do this. So let's say that someone doesn't have time for a debate and you don't have a week, and maybe you've got 30 minutes of a meeting, but you know that there's something that really actually needs this. You want to expose the extremes of thinking on for or against. Let's take this and look at it like, if we were to try to make this micro, what's a good fit for a micro debate? And so we've put together a little thing that you can think about here. If you're in a situation where you're facing a trade-off, it's or, not and. Like, we can do this, we can do A or B. We can't do both. It's great for a micro debate. Another thing is, you're ready to move. You can't wait. Maybe you've got a lot of pressure from senior leadership, or there's an expiration date with a client. Another way to recognize when you are ready for a debate is the possible paths to the destination. Or it could be two different destinations, but this is important. One of the things that we see people use debate really effectively is, what's clear to everyone that's debating is they know the ways that we're debating to get to a place, meaning it's so clear what we're trying to accomplish. The success criteria is clear. The outcome is clear, and the possible paths are clear. If you have these three things, you're ready for a quick little micro debate. And the way to do that is we call the 4 asks. Liz, I'm going to have you take me through each of these. So
Okay.
you go into this, and if you've got that context, then you're ready to ask these 4 questions.
Yeah. And, before I do that, I want to address John's comment. Why do we assume debate and not dialogue?
Mm,
And, usually a good debate, there's been a lot of dialogue leading up to it.
Yeah.
And debate is, dialogue is where you want to generate ideas and options. Debate is where you want to close that down and pick between one of them. So, yes, John, to your point, you probably want to have a good dialogue before having a debate. When you're ready for a debate, you might want to practice the 4 asks. And it's just a simple thing to remember. Number 1 is ask a question and don't answer it. Now, prior to this, of course, you want to frame the issue and then ask the question. Number 2 is you want to ask for evidence. So, okay, if you think we should do A and not B, what evidence do you have to support that? What makes you think that? From what did you, base that conclusion on? And it keeps people focused on facts, not just opinions. Number 3, ask everyone. And you might even make a little seating chart of everyone around the table and write people's names down and put a check mark after each person has made a comment and joined that debate. And you will see very quickly who hasn't weighed in yet. One thing you might do is start the conversation, which is we want to hear from everyone once before hearing from a single person twice.
mhm.
But you want to make sure that everyone has had a chance to debate. We just had a few debates as a team last week, and
We did 3 of them in one day on things that were important. Some things we hadn't moved on, but we were ready to. Some things we wanted to figure out if we were ready to move on.
there was about half the team that had an active role in the issue and had weighed in, but there were 3 people who were more junior on the team and weren't as involved in it, and we hadn't heard from them. And so we just said, okay, we'd like to hear from, person 1, 2, and 3, and we know you aren't working on this daily, but you've been here and listening, and we would love to know your insights.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see they kind of like joined in that debate. So ask everyone. And then 4 is at some point in that debate, you might want to ask people to switch opinions. This is a practice I learned from Ziab, then at Microsoft, where just when the group was starting to settle into a leaning, he would say, okay, let's argue against it. And it was uncomfortable. Like, okay, Shawn, you've been arguing for this. Liz, you've been arguing against it. Switch roles. Liz, you're for it. Shawn, you're against it. Go. And what that does is it takes the focus off of who won the debate and it muddies that. It actually muddies what's not important and puts clarity around what is important, which is the winning position, the winning option. And so it's like not about winners or losers. It's about what we ended up deciding together, and it teaches people to hold their opinions lightly.
And
as we saw.
And what it does for me when I'm participating is, one, is it gives me a chance to weigh in heavy on an idea or a point of view or a way to get somewhere. And then when somebody weighs in equally as strong on the opposite path or the other way, it forces me to confront the distance between where we are and now all of a sudden I see the problem different. It kind of helps me walk around it in a way where it exposes the things that I might not have seen otherwise. And I find that to be extremely valuable for a team to listen to that dialogue back and forth, especially if you don't make the decision in the room that day and it's not always necessary. As I go away, it changes completely how I ruminate and think about the things that were discussed, because I can go back and forth in my mind. And then I will often come to a new place of thinking altogether. Did you have something you wanted to say?
I was going to say something, Shawn, if you don't mind. I thought that Kayla had a really good point about how good debates make you want to go from one side to the other. And perhaps that's a really great barometer for our entrenchment. Sometimes we come, and we've said this a lot throughout the day, is to hold your ideas lightly. Well, sometimes if we come into a debate, and this happened to me during our team debate this week, I came in really well prepared, and then suddenly I felt that tension. All of a sudden, my ideas, they weren't under attack, but now I was faced to confront, like you said, a totally new host of things I hadn't considered. And I felt myself a little bit of intellectual whiplash, kind of like Kayla said. And I think that's a great barometer for you. If you're feeling that, it's a good indication that you are holding your ideas lightly. You're not entrenched.
Mm.
Mhm.
You know, one of the great things that happened in our team debate last week is one of our conclusions or decisions put a lot of workload on Andrew.
Mhm, mhm.
And, you know, I watched as the whole team kind of built empathy as we realized this is probably the course of action we need to take. But like, okay, Andrew's going to be left holding the bag on it. And everyone's kind of like, it gave everyone an understanding of, okay, Andrew's kind of going to have to make some sacrifices here. We're going to have to move some other things off as priority for him to be able to do it. Like, how can I help? So it's building empathy for other points of view. And it's also building empathy for people who are going to be left
Mm.
carrying out a decision.
Mhm.
A debate is like surgery. It's not something we should use to treat everything. There needs to be discussions and brainstorming sessions. But when you need your team to sharpen their thinking and commit to something, and you want to build a lot of intelligence around those options, the consequences of those options, and build that collective will, a debate is a really good tool.
So, and for the next episode, we've got several things that we're thinking about, but we'd love to hear from you. So, if you have a leadership challenge that you are grappling with, we know that sometimes it's not apparent on what to do. Please submit your challenges to us. We'll follow up with a request for challenges so we can take on something that's meaty, something that's challenging, a leadership challenge that matters to you. We know that it matters to the people that you lead. We're excited to be able to explore the next series of challenges, and one that will be coming up. We'll be looking at the role and how AI is changing leadership. And so watch for that. Thanks so much for attending today, and have a fantastic weekend.